My name is Robert Smith. My friends call me Bob, and I'm running for Anastasia Mosquito Control Board, Seat 1. And the reason I'm running is that the Mosquito Control Board, in my opinion, has some problems. Any business that budgets a $700,000 deficit for the upcoming budget and had about a $400,000 budget deficit last year, in the private sector, that probably gets you fired. There are problems in the mosquito control that I think the genesis is that not the folks who are on the board are all good people, but it's a perspective. That's the board of directors of the mosquito control, and it should be using best practices in business and management. And most of the people on the board have made their livelihood lifelong in the government sector, and they don't have business management experience. And I think that's why we have some of the problems, because that is the board of directors. We have a very competent executive director of mosquito control, and he gets paid big bucks to know how to kill mosquitoes, how to follow the state law and federal law, and all the EPA regulations. Secondly, to let you all know a little bit about me, I've been retired since, I guess, 1999, and have been involved in community service all my life. My father taught me that you had to give back the blessings that you received tenfold. And I've tried to do that in different ways over my life. I think I can help the mosquito control overcome some of their problems. I bring experience lifelong with 8 or 10 companies in the federal bankruptcy court as a turnaround special. Don't give me anything that's working perfectly, because my friends will accuse me that I'll mess it up so I can fix it. I like to fix problems. It's one of the things in life that is gratifying for me. I don't fish, I don't hunt, or have any hobbies other than public service. So this is an opportunity to improve on the work that's already been done and make the Mosquito Control Board better.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, one of the issues, or one thing that some folks say is that, well, we have all this reserve money, it's okay to dip into that for our shortfalls. What do you think about that?
I think that's the height of insanity, and probably an invitation to have the first hurricane we've had since '64. In my life experiences, every time I get outside of the box and take risk, with what is really public health, and I've been concerned since they bought the land out in the Ag Center at the height of the market. In my opinion, who've been in real estate all my life, they paid too much. They bought too many acres. But more importantly, they were going to cut into those reserves to build that building. And we're depleting our reserves, and we already know, based on the estimates of prior boards, if we got a hurricane and we've got standing water, particularly if it's a late season in September and October, that's almost outside the mosquito season. But the residual effects, they lay the eggs, and you don't get to deal with the effects until maybe next year or 5 months later when the temperature gets back up. So I really think that's a bad idea. The Mosquito Control Board is not a charity. And I think the county commissioners set an excellent example when hard times hit 3.5 years ago. They cut the budget. by about 30%. I think the employment was reduced about 23%. Mosquito control employment has actually gone up. We have more administrative positions and fewer people fighting mosquitoes. So I think depletion of reserves is fiscally irresponsible.
Okay. So you wouldn't have bought the land, so therefore my next question was going to be, what do you think about moving the building up on Highway 16? So you'd keep it where it is currently?
I'm not opposed to moving it on the high ground at the Ag Center, but I am opposed to spending $4 or $5 million. In my opinion, we need to diversify our mosquito fighting assets, because if we have a hurricane, the damage may be on the south end of the county, it may be on the north end. So if you spread those assets out to where you're not having your drivers drive so far, we have almost $100,000 worth of gasoline at $3.80 budgeted this coming year. Now, I'm not sure why they're paying $3.80, because you can get in blanket purchase groups, and if you get an agricultural permit, I think you can avoid all the tax. That lowers the costs by 20 cents a gallon, I think, is the federal tax. I'm not sure what the state tax is, but I know there's some in there. I like the idea of diversifying. I don't like the idea of mosquito control, of building monuments to posterity. You know, most of their assets, you go back 12 years ago, we had one director, we had a secretary. The accounting work was done outside, I'm told. I haven't verified that. And that was the inside staff. We got more administrative people looking at the budget than we do folks spraying for mosquitoes. And I subscribe to, I want every mosquito in the county dead. There are people on the control saying, oh no, you can't kill all the mosquitoes. What will the birds eat and the bats eat? Trust me, they'll find something.
So let me ask, Bob, have you attended Mosquito Control District board meetings?
I have attended, but most often I watch on TV.
Okay, so you're there. Do you have any experience in pesticides, chemicals, that type of business?
No, I don't, and I don't think you should to serve on that board, and I'll tell you why. The president of General Motors does not know how to build a car, but he knows how to manage a budget and how to handle personnel. We have staff right now that are experts in that area. That's carried through to the school board. It's just my philosophy that you don't need teachers on the school board. You need business people to manage the assets and to set policy for the paid professionals, that we pay big bucks to do that work. And I know we have an entomologist on the board, and we have a lady that's engaged in pesticides, and I promise you, neither of those people know any more than Rudy does. He's an expert.
So let's go back to your former statement. You're not opposed to moving to higher ground
No.
out there.
For administrative services,
Or maybe one of the issues has been stated by several folks. They're concerned that with the current location where all the chemicals are stored and the equipment is stored, in the case of a decent sized hurricane coming, all that would have to be relocated out of the floodplain, out of the danger zone, and the land up off 16 and Agricultural Boulevard would keep that out of harm's way, and therefore that's a big part of the two parts of the justification to move. One is that, and two is it's more centrally located, so it would actually reduce travel times for those folks involved in travel.
And if the eye of the storm comes ahead on Highway 16 and we have a category 3 and up, none of that will be there. Most hurricanes, it's wind damage. And if you look at it as a military operation, you want to diversify your assets in the event. Out on the island, with today's technology and meteorologists, there is ample time to move equipment. And if they want to use a yard, but I was in the cable TV business, I had 600 employees that drove trucks, and we were on a 5-acre site, not 25 acres. Now, maybe the only way they could make the deal out there was to buy 25 and they hoped to sell, 15 later on. But I remember reading the chemical thing, and most of the chemicals they use come in a granular form and are mixed. Well, we don't have any problem with storing them in a concrete block building in a secure location with a berm around it to protect the roof from wind damage. That's basically a low-cost operation. But the folks that have assigned territory and live and work close to where they kill mosquitoes, when I go to Rotary Club or I go to the Civitan or to the City Council, and I'm in the mosquito killing business, and my friends and neighbors who I'm supposed to be helping keep their neighborhood safe from mosquitoes, they're going to tell me about it. They're the eyes and ears. I don't want a guy that lives in Julington Creek spraying on the island. So if you put employees closer to where they work, you'll get a better job, you'll get happier employees, and you'll get much better performance, because they'll get information, intelligence from all the people because they live in the community.
So currently the district, I believe, rents or leases location in Hastings.
We have a lease location in Hastings. We've got a facility I haven't seen sort of between the Northwest and Ponte Vedra, letting the very valuable land where there are more mosquitoes in Ponte Vedra than there are almost anywhere else. I lived there for 5 years. I lived in a time where the trucks rolled every other night. You could hear them at 3 and 4 in the morning come down the street. It sounded like a plane taking off. Now they have quieter stuff.
Fogging, right?
Yeah,
Fogging.
they don't do that anymore. And I'm not sure, I don't know the science behind that. They may have developed better chemicals. But those sorts of things are great PR tools. And they were effective. We had, I can say from when I lived in Ponte Vedra, the system of the trucks running at night, there were much fewer mosquitoes in the marshes of Guana and the salt marshes of Ponte Vedra than there are today. And when I moved into the west side of St. Augustine off of Masters Drive, when I first moved there, we hardly ever saw a mosquito. For the last couple of years, this is one of the reasons I'm running. Something is wrong. Ditches don't get drained. Maybe they get treated. But if you drain the water, there's no place for them to lay the eggs. So, and the last part of that, I think it's just good for people who have successful business careers to give something back, serve 4 years, and go back into the private sector. I know Ms. Bequette was running 4 years ago because I saw her at candidate forums. And the same time, Mr. Radford. I think Ms. Browning may have served 2 terms already, but I'm not positive to that. I think you ought to serve 4 years and go home and talk to your neighbors and see if you did a good job.
Well, then, gee, I think I have a pretty good idea about where you might stand on the purchase of a helicopter. What do you think?
Insanity. And the one thing I haven't heard, and when that debate was going on, I put some
It's not current, but it was.
Yeah, the first go round, and my opponent, frankly, was the leader of that, along with Mr. Radford. But he's an Air Force guy, and he loves things that fly. He's also a friend of mine. But nobody asked, how much does it cost to fly a helicopter? And I got on the phone, I called David Shore, and I said, what does it cost? And back then they had two. That was before they crashed one of them, which was a blessing in disguise. That may have been divine providence. I said, how much does it cost to operate a helicopter? He said, about $500,000 a year. Anybody know that? Nobody ever said that. They wanted to buy a helicopter. They didn't bring it up. They knew it. That's where I'm from. That's dishonest. Even if it had cost $380,000. The three biggest expenses are a guy to fly it that your insurance carrier will insure, and then the gas that goes in it, and then you got the maintenance that's required by the state, by the EPA, because it's spraying chemicals, all kinds of inherent problems. I would prefer there's a saying in Texas, a hungry dog hunts. There are lots of folks that own helicopters who are really hungry right now. They have payments to make, and you can negotiate much more favorable deals than you could 3 years ago. But I can't see the risk of crashing a helicopter. If it's pilot error, then you're going to be dealing with your insurance carrier. Said, we ain't insuring him anymore. Then what do you do if you got anything left? And usually in a helicopter, which I have some experiences in, you crash one, you jump it. Yeah. So I would much prefer to lease. It's beneficial to the taxpayer. It's beneficial to providing jobs in the community, which are higher paying jobs. The folks that fly helicopters are highly trained people. And I think that's the synergy that should exist. Anything that the private sector can do as well or better, you get residual effects from having those businesses and the businesses that come in to service them.
Margaret?
Mr. Smith, regarding these deficits, these budgeted losses, what does the director tell you about that? I mean, obviously
I haven't
he builds
spoken
the
to
budget.
the director about it.
Have you asked any of the members? I mean,
I have inquired, and I get different answers from different people. I've been told that they built up the reserves in anticipation of building a building.
Yes.
I think that's accurate.
I would agree.
I think we know since then we have experiences of more recent effects in areas like Louisiana with Katrina about what the cost and the effects are as it relates to mosquitoes, and how much does it cost to get it back under control, because you're not ever going to get them all killed. Mm-hmm. So I just think that when you build up a nice reserve, that our problem is not that the reserve is too big, but that we have too many employees that are not killing mosquitoes.
So you would say, don't show this as a loss, show it as either a transfer
Well, it's a net
out of
loss.
reserves.
It comes out of reserves.
But
ultimately, if you establish a habit of spending more than you take in,
right.
somewhere there is a day of reckoning. And I'm
Right.
sure that they're thinking, well, the economy is going to get better. Do you want to bet the health and safety of the people in this county in case it doesn't?
Well, we've heard for years they built up reserves long before there was a decision on buying land for a building. That they just had this rainy day fund in the event of
But
something
most of those
happening.
reserves occurred
Right.
because of inflated property values from 2000 to 2008. And what we're looking at, in my opinion, having made my life in real estate and my livelihood for a better part of my adult life in businesses that were related in real estate, I don't think we're going back to the flip a house every 90 days and make 30,000 bucks that we're going to be stabilized right about where we are. So in my opinion, and the folks in the real estate business, we're stuck here for at least 10 years.
Okay, so maybe they should be looking at a reduction in their tax rate?
Certainly not an increase. If property values hadn't made the adjustments in the recession, and in real estate in this county, some people call it a depression. That's starting to come out a little bit now, but we don't know what the future holds. Politically speaking, that has a big impact. I think, and this is just one man's opinion, if Obama gets elected again, we're going to have the same economic policies from the federal government and $1.5 trillion deficits every year. And that, when you have a deficit in the federal government, that soaks up all the money for the speculators. Go to a bank, any bank in this county, and say, I want to build 5 houses over here in this subdivision. Good luck, it ain't going to happen. And that's the problem. The money goes from banks that would normally have participating agreements with community banks to make construction loans for the housing market, and when they're having to buy treasury notes and bonds to finance the deficit, there is no money to lend to new business that's speculative. Nobody will lend that money unless you got collateral to insure it, and it's basically a sure thing.
Yeah. Well, let's deal with
this. And that didn't really answer your question.
No, because I want to know why, what you found out about these two figures.
Well, because I was only, it took them a while to get me a copy of the budget, and I've only had that a week, so I'm not completely up to speed.
Okay. But you do think they are budgeted losses? They aren't just transfers?
Their operating net expenses are greater than their income by $700,000, and the way they make up that difference is they take it out of reserves.
Okay, right, I understand that.
Now, is that a decision that they have decided to not build a building and buy a helicopter, or they've picked one over the other? I think initially they were making reserves to do both. I hope the helicopter issue is dead forever, but
it only takes 3 votes to bring it back.
Yeah, what I would say to you, because I want to be responsive, we certainly don't need a tax increase. And I am fearful that they have a pattern of deficits over the last 4 years, each one successively higher than the last. And you get in the habit of deficit financing, and then at some point, somebody has to rein it in and say, we got too many people and we got to let some folks go. The record knows about that.
Well,
all too well, sir.
They are required to have an audit every year, an outside audit. And
who hires the auditors? The board.
Right,
nobody auditing
auditors,
any company that's not a friend of the people running it.
Well, I don't know about that.
No, but we know they're running a deficit.
Yeah.
We do know that.
Right.
And I will say this, I just went through their budget over the weekend, and I found $300,000 worth of savings in a 2-hour period. Now, that's without going and asking the people. I am unaware of any lawsuit that the Mosquito Control Board has been involved in since I've lived here. There may be one, but I'm not aware of it. And yet they have an attorney there that they pay $24,000 a year. That works out to $2,000 for a 2-hour meeting. That's a pretty good salary where I come from. I'm not sure you need that. Why can't they make a sharing agreement? The county has 6 or 8 attorneys on staff.
Let me tie into that. One of the proposals in the past has been discussed is that the county take over the mosquito control operation, and there's been some discussion. Do you think the county could do a better job? Do you think the mosquito control district does a
The
good job?
county could do a better job of budgeting, but I think an independent mosquito control board, which I support, it doesn't, they don't have to get paid anything. I don't think they do get paid. I don't really know. I volunteered to do a job.
Yeah, no.
But I support, and I said that in my statement, I support an independent mosquito control board because it is a service-oriented business. But I'm going to raise a couple of other issues where it just seemed like to me there were opportunities to save money. They got $90,000 for software, which I'm told is a database management software to track service and spraying. I said, I was in the cable business for 15 years. I will give you my customer service database for free. We run service calls. We separate them between customers and line problems, which is like marshes and ditches and larvae as opposed to fogging people's houses. And I'll give it to you for free. $90,000 for software that QuickBooks has the same thing for free if you know how to adapt it. Now, one of the people who's running, and my source there is Randy Covington, who is running for I think it's Miss McQuett, C3, and he's an IT extraordinary guy. He says, I'm doing because they got an IT, a database manager, and I'll do all that for free. They want to buy in this year's budget 4 computers for $6,000. I'm sorry, but I can go to Office Max or Dell Computers and buy the best computer they make with software for $350. One of the other things, I called some of my friends that are in mosquito control business in other counties. We have 38 vehicles that spray. We have 8 or 10 people who are spraying. Now, some of those get used with the seasonal workers that they hire, but they've cut on the number of people spraying with seasonal workers from 10. They cut one out for office staff, and they used 2 of them for interns, and I looked and saw, well, there are 5 summer interns there. I'm not sure what they're doing. Some of them come from the ag department, some of them come from EPA, and are paid. 3 of them are paid by grants. Looks like 2 of them are paid by the Mosquito Control Board. So I would like to see some changes made so you got a different group of people looking at the same way. Nobody has all the answers to anything. In business, you change people around. You switch editors. Peter covers the county. Before that he covered the city. Before that he did something else. Just to keep people fresh and challenged. That's good people management. I think when you bring in new folks, you get new ideas on how to save money on old problems. $90,000 is what they just spent to buy an airboat. And the complaint was the airboat left them stranded out in the marsh because it wouldn't start. Now they got two mechanics, they got a mechanic and a helper. I'm sorry, if you can't make the boat run, I'm gonna get another mechanic. At worst possible thing, maybe the motor was worn out. Why buy a $90,000 boat?
Well, now I thought it said, the story we ran said 45. Are they buying two?
I don't know, I read in your newspaper, I think, that they bought a boat for $90,000. Maybe I'm confused, it wouldn't be the first
Yeah,
time.
well, I just read that story before I came in here. And, you know, quite frankly, I wasn't sure whether they were buying one or two. So, but it did say 40, they voted to spend 45.
Maybe they bought more than one
But
boat.
it may be that they have bought more than one, because I wasn't sure.
Well, I am a customer of the record because I support and I save them where I can go back and read them because I never can find the story I'm looking for online.
But I'm with you about, you know, did they do, my question of that story is, are they sure they have done the due diligence on repairs? I mean, it's a 1996.
And I'm not sure, but that's the first thing. Why buy a new boat when the motor is the problem? Now maybe the boat is worn out. I think it was like 25 years old.
96, yeah.
Oh, it was 96 boat?
So that would have been 16 years, probably. But that's probably a long time.
That's
but
a
it
long
depends.
time if they're using it every day, but I'm sure they're probably not.
I didn't think so either. I asked about when we had a candidate in here 2 years ago about the number of vehicles, and I was told that because not only the seasonal workers, but the fact that they had vehicles that broke down, and so they had to have extras, and you kind of go, well, why do you keep having extras? Why don't you just do a better job of maintaining what you have? But there was that kind of reason for having that many vehicles. So
somebody that serves on a board like that, their job is to ask tough questions of management. And I've been to mosquito control boards, and I've never heard a tough question asked by anybody. Every question I ever heard was what I considered to be a softball.
Well, I've watched them on TV because of the time frame. And my question to you is based on what you just said about, you know, all these things, like they have a lawyer and they have this and they are buying $90,000 worth of database software and $6,000 worth of computers. And if they are a policy-making board, the director needs to be making those decisions and bringing them to the board after due diligence.
I believe under Florida law that any purchase
Right.
depending on the item, some things are $500, some things are $5,000. But those purchases have to be approved.
Oh, yes, I know that.
In accordance with their policy and
but I guess my question is to you, is the director doing his job to determine whether they need $90,000 worth of database equipment and whether they need $6,000 worth of computers? I guess that's the question.
Well, I know that the director brought the request from staff to the board and they approved it. But in that discussion, according to people that I checked with, and nobody said, why don't we fix the motor? Why don't we get a new motor if that's the problem? 16 years on a motor, if it's used a lot, it might be time to rebuild it or buy a new one and pop it in.
So they aren't asking the questions, or in your opinion,
That's my opinion.
they aren't asking the questions they should be asking.
Well, and there's another side to that. If somebody on the board is doing their job, and I've got an agenda from the chairman that's generated by staff 2 weeks before the meeting, I'm going to make some phone calls. I may go into the office and talk to the people who are making those recommendations one-on-one. But it appears to an outsider that those decisions are made right there, and folks are not really inquiring beforehand, because you can tell through the discussions most of the time that the first time they saw it was on the agenda by the questions that you got asked. Now, that's a general statement, and I'm not, what I'm saying is that my interest in this position was piqued. The three catalyst events were the purchase of that land, wanting to build an extremely expensive building when we were in a recession, and the centralization as opposed to diversification.
Mhm.
And then when I got this thing and I started reading about the deficits, and I've never heard anybody stand up and say, is this really a good idea to have a $700,000 net operating loss? How is that going to damage us if we have a category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane? Because invariably, in my business experience, which is 50 years, every time I roll the dice, it seems like I had to pay double that. And I don't think you can do that in an area where public health, not only public health, but two of our biggest industries in this county, chickens and horses and cattle. If we got a West Nile virus epidemic here, that has huge ramifications. So I just think, personally, I play my cards close to my vest. I ask a lot of questions, and then I go to other mosquito control boards, and I ask other people who know. Because with me, some of those folks, Ms. Browning sells real estate and manages a motel, I've heard. Ms. Bequette is somehow or other involved in the study of bugs. I don't know whether she's a teacher or what, but she's an entomologist. Mr. Radford's retired from the Air Force, and he's got a lot of time. I have a lot of time to spend with this as a volunteer. And I think when you work for a living,